Hello! Today I'm going to be looking at this Derwent Pastel Shades Paint Pan set. There are 12 colours and I'm curious to know what they're like, so let's get into it! You can see all of the colours at the top of the box, and it's very nicely packaged. I bought this quite a long time ago and I'm finally getting around to it. I also have some other Derwent sets to review, and hopefully those will happen soon as well. But let's get opening this one. I decided to go with the pastel shades first because I just feel like some pretty colours and the box looked very appealing. I like the flamingos on the front. It's such a struggle to get them out though. But here's what it looks like, and it's got a bit of dust on it from, I presume, inside the box. All of the Derwent sets I've seen come in this same plastic box, so it gets a bit confusing as to which set is which because none of them are actually labelled other than with the Derwent logo. But let's open it up. There's a little swatch card inside, and I'll just hold that up so you can see the colour names, including a pink flamingo. And then we can see the squares of colours once I peel off this shiny piece of plastic. I think they're in half pans, but they might be slightly different to regular watercolour half pans. There's also a water brush which is split into two pieces so it will fit in, and it's got a little stopper thing to keep the water from running out when it's like this. Don't lose it because we'll need it later on. And there's also a yellow sponge, which I tend to forget to use, and I think this was no exception. So I tried filling it up with a pipette and it's just such a puny amount of water, I just ended up dunking the whole thing in my water pot. That is clean water even though the water pot looks very grubby. But that's just the easiest way to do it, and then once that's done I can screw on the top part and then we have a full-size water brush. I've collected quite a lot of these over the years, but you just give it a little squeeze and the water comes through. This one worked perfectly well, no issues with it whatsoever. They're very handy for travelling, and you can use that sponge to wipe off the brush in between colours. So I'll try and get that lid back on, and no, annoyingly, it just doesn't quite fit in there. I wish Derwent would design the brush to be just a tiny little bit shorter and then it would be fine. Leaving the lid off means that the brush is going to get bent, so don't do that. That's why we need to keep that stopper, because you do have to take the brush apart and keep it in two pieces if you want to fit it in the box. That's such an annoying design flaw. But anyway, here are the colours closer up. You can see they look a bit dusty, and I've noticed this with other Derwent pans, but I'm going to use the water brush to paint out all of the different pastel colours. It's like these pans have a skin on them when you first get them, and so it does take a little while to work the water in and get the colours to lift off, but after a while, when you've used them a few times, it's much easier to lift the colours. It's the same with the ink tints ones that I have. I was dipping my water brush into the water because it's just so much easier than trying to take off the colours with a sponge. But as you can see, all of the colours are very light and pastel-y. I'd say the pink flamingo is maybe the brightest of all the colours, but even then, when you look at them, the values are all pretty much the same. It's like a light to mid-tone value. And this is going to come into play later on. I will be talking a bit more about that because you could probably see there's going to be a problem here. But otherwise, the colour palette they have is very pretty. Although the orchid pink and lavender are very similar to one another, the lavender is just slightly more purple than the orchid pink. I think for a set of 12 there's enough of each colour, although the pink flamingo is as red as we're going to get in this set. And it really does look a lot more like pink, funnily enough, being a pastel shade. I love this turquoise. I think that's probably my favourite in the set. And now I'm looking at them, it may also be the brightest one. That and the pink flamingo are the two bright ones. The mint's very pretty, and then there are some earth tones like this artichoke, and also the storm grey and silver blue I guess you could consider to be earthy neutral tones. But they're all most definitely mixed with white to give that pastel look. And my first impressions of the colour palette is it's very appealing. I like the colours, but now we're going to get into the problems when I get into the artwork. But firstly, here's a look at them while they're all mostly dry. And yeah, nice colours. A fair bit of opacity to them that will be from the white that's in them, possibly titanium white. I don't know any of the pigment numbers, there's no information on that. I wouldn't have a clue if they're light fast or not. Anyway, let's get going with my first picture, and I decided to draw a pastel dragon because I just thought that would be quite fun with the colour palette I have. Pastel colours always make me think of whimsical, girly fantasy things, and of course a dragon was the first thing that came into my mind, so I figured this would be fun to paint and take up most of the rest of this page. I'm just sketching it in with a graphite pencil. It took me a little while to get it right and to get it to look how I wanted it to. I was working from a reference and the dragon had legs, but I decided I didn't want to have legs on mine and rather it's going to have wings. So that's what I ended up doing instead. I just kind of made up that part. I started inking and then remembered I needed to rub out some of that graphite so it wasn't so dark. And I'm using that double-ended Fude pen, which has one side black and the other is grey. And I started with the grey side because I thought it would be a little more delicate and go well with the pastel colours. It's not the most complicated looking dragon, I left it fairly simple with my outlines, but I actually quite like the line art. And now for the painting! If you haven't already figured out what the issue is, let me tell you. Because all of the colours are light to medium tone, there is no way to get dark values in this, and that's really annoying because I'm someone who likes to have high contrast in my pictures. I was the same as a photographer when I took portraits of people. It was always in high key lighting, so there would be a really big difference between the lights and the darks. But with these pastel colours, they're all light to medium tones, so you can't get that high key look, and everything ends up being mid-toned, as you could see here. The colours themselves are really pretty, but without having those shadows, it just looks very flat and one-dimensional. I did my best to add layers of deeper colour just to try and build it up a bit, and I was somewhat successful because the blues at least are quite strong, but the pinks are pretty light overall. So, in my opinion, this set does not stand alone. It needs something else with it in order to get some darker shades. As a travel set on its own, I don't think it's going to be very useful, unless of course you like to do light coloured paintings, in which case then this may be just what you want. But for me, who likes to work in light and dark, it's not going to work very well at all. It needed a background, so I freehanded the circle, and I'm actually quite proud with how round it is. It's not too wobbly. The yellow looks quite nice on the background, so I don't have an issue with the colours themselves. I think they're very pretty. It would just be nice if there were some darker ones too, just so that you can have some shadows going on. The grey pen had pretty much disappeared underneath the opacity of the paints, so I'm going over everything with the black pen. I just felt like it needed a dark outline just to give it some kind of value and contrast as well. I mean, it's all a matter of personal opinion. You may have preferred it when the grey lines were there, but I just think the black lines give it a lot more oomph, and now it looks quite cartoony, so I'm glad I did this. I had tried using black fine liners over the top, and they just stopped working immediately, so they don't like the paint and will get clogged up very easily, but the Fude brush pen worked well, and I'm going over everything with the grey now just to add in a little bit of shadow, as you can see. And I think this helped the picture a lot. I also pulled out the white ink just to get some really bright highlights and try and push that value gradient out a little bit further. And I think this was a big improvement to the picture, and I'm actually really happy with how this one turned out. Here's the final picture. Very pastel-y indeed. I decided I may as well do the other page as well, because I really want to do a princess castle. I thought this would be perfect for the pastel colours. Oh my goodness, this drawing took ages to do. Castles are not easy to draw, but I got there eventually. And this particular one has quite a fantastical landscape around it as well, with mountains in the background. And this was an AI picture. I think both of them are actually, but I just thought they would be fun to draw. The colour palettes in them were pretty much exactly what I wanted. Although, of course, my final pictures end up looking quite different to the reference pictures, but there's no way I could draw a castle just making it up from out of my head. It would look a horrendous mess. This one turned out okay, actually. But yeah, these colours, I just struggled with them so much. Same problem as before, I just couldn't get it dark enough for my liking, which was a little frustrating, but in the end I just kind of had to go with what the colours would allow. And in hindsight, maybe I should have pulled out one of my other palettes, like the Derwent Inktense box, with darker colours, and maybe use the two together, because I think that's really how you're going to have to use this set. It needs to go with something else, as I said before. So whether that's the Inktense, or maybe even just some regular watercolours, or watercolour pencils and crayons. Having a few dark ones would help make this set a lot more useful than it is. I hope that makes sense. So personally, I wouldn't recommend this set if you're just going to use it on its own, but if you're going to combine it with other sets that have dark colours, then it is actually a really nice one. The colours are very pretty, and I think they would be a good addition to a more regular coloured set. Actually, now I'm thinking about it, gouache would go quite well with these, because the consistency of them is definitely more gouache-like than watercolour, mainly due to the opacity of the white in them. This is as much as I could achieve with the paints on their own, and now I'm going in with pen just to make it look a bit better. This is the grey outline once more. I forgot to mention that I used regular paint brushes for this particular painting because the water brush is just too thin and it would have taken forever on the larger areas. I really only use water brushes when I'm travelling or am outside of my studio. Otherwise, I'll choose regular paintbrushes. So I sketched in some of the darker parts with grey ink and then went over with black ink to get some real shadow, and now I'm trying to add in just a bit more colour to get slightly more depth of shadow in some of those areas. It's really difficult. They do layer pretty well though, and I was able to get slightly better of a result with another layer on the top. But yes, these pictures were quite a struggle to do, and I'm adding my trusty white ink over the top just to add in some kind of highlight and make it look a bit more alive because it was looking very flat even with my efforts to make areas darker. For some unknown reason, I decided to go over some of the lines with the black, and it looks really stupid. I don't know what I was thinking. I should have just outlined the whole thing in black, but here's the finished image. It doesn't even scan well because it's too pale. But that's all I got done today. I've still got a space down here. I just couldn't think of anything else to paint in there, so I'm done. So I was able to achieve a fair bit out of them, but nowhere near as much as I would have liked, and I had to use other tools like pens in order to get some interest into the pictures, because they would have been very flat and one-dimensional otherwise. I can't fault the actual colours though. I think it's a really pretty colour palette. It just needs dark colours too, so if it was a 24 set with half pastel and half dark colour, it would be absolutely ideal. You can see I also used quite a lot of paint because I was trying to build up layers, and I've put that little stopper back in the bottle. It's still got water in, and it seems to be watertight for travelling, so at least it does that much. But that's all I've got for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I'd really appreciate a thumbs up, and you might want to subscribe and check out these other 2 videos that I've made in the past. I'll see you all again really soon in my next video. Swatch you later. Bye!